Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. Hope you guys are doing better than me. But we are going to go ahead and plow forward. Just because a YouTuber who is a Seahawks fan gets sick doesn't mean the NFL season stops. No, we got 4 games left, and the world is going to keep spinning regardless of my condition. So, as we do a couple times a week, me and Brandon meet up to talk about this upcoming game, and we've got an interesting one. We've got Thursday Night Football, our Thursday Night Football game for the week. We're in our special 3-0 uniforms. Never lost
Ooh,
in these uniforms before.
let's go.
And hopefully we can make that 4-0. So I am joined by, as I said, Brandon of the Hawks Nest. Brandon, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you as a trooper, man. Just get you a little of that Toradol shot, and we got you right back up on your feet here.
Yeah. I wish there was like a Toradol replacement for things like this.
I feel like we should be at a point, Brendan, like in that Jetson era where we can like put a face mask on and then we're instantly back to feeling good from a cold.
Mm,
Feels like we haven't advanced very far, even with all of the instant shoot it up your nose and put, do use this, use that, Robitussin, all that stuff. Still seems like you got to suffer and fight through it bit by bit.
right. So, yeah, we've got quite the game tomorrow. In many ways, it's a game that is going to define how fans feel for the rest of this season.
Hmm.
If you find a way to win, suddenly all the bad feelings from the last month, I would say, kind of go away at that point, right? A lot of people are going to quickly get over some of these losses. People are going to start looking at things from a more optimistic point of view. They're going to start looking at what this team can do instead of what they can't do. And suddenly the playoffs are it's going to feel like it's just right there. You just got to take it.
Yeah.
But if you lose, that's going to confirm a lot of what people think they are seeing with this team right now, which is they're becoming about the things that they can't do. They're becoming a team that is defined best by how they can't stop the run. They can't really pressure the quarterback. They can't run the ball, unlike where they were at one point earlier this season. So we've got some stuff to talk about here to try to figure out how we can make something happen here. So let's just go ahead and get right into it with these San Francisco 49ers. They are coming to Seattle, which is nice, although that hasn't helped us the last few times we played in Seattle, admittedly. But let's start with this. Let's start with this Niners offense because there's a little bit of mystery on that side of the ball right now, mostly at a quarterback. But I got to ask you, Brandon, does it matter who the quarterback is?
I mean, it kind of doesn't, does it?
Mm,
We've had so many times over the last few years, not just of this year, but in recent years, where backup quarterbacks have come in and been able to do just fine against the Seahawks defense. And I think that there's a reason for that. It's not just mainly luck or that it just is. Well, we suck against backup quarterbacks. I think it's because a little bit as we talked about yesterday, the designs to attacking a Coach Carroll defense has been historically speaking to require a quarterback to remain patient because his defense is first going to usually, not this year, but in recent history, stop the run first and foremost and then limit the big play. The last thing then that you need to do as a quarterback is just stay really patient on the short and intermediate throws. And if you can stay in that pocket for a whole game, you can have some relative success against a Coach Carroll defense. And so backups in the past, Mullins multiple times with San Francisco 49ers, we saw him come out and do it. Colt McCoy in the last couple of years on 2 different teams do it to our defense. And so I think that you can't really say that already because of that, because already you've shown a bit of a susceptibility to getting dinged by these backup quarterbacks who do stay fundamentally sound in their approach. But then also because of the fact you're facing a team that is very run heavy and is able to just basically lean on its run game almost whole hog and get the job done. And that we've had teams attack us in that way this year. And that has been a big vulnerability to this team. We've had 6, 7, 8 rushers who have set season highs this year in
mhm.
facing our defense.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out here. On the one hand, you've got Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. I think he can maybe get the ball about 9 yards down the field before it starts to wobble.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you have Josh Johnson, who I think is trying to set a record for most teams played for in an NFL career.
Yeah.
And deep down, every Seahawks fan just knows it doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is because if Kyle Shanahan has a brain, he's going to go into Seattle tomorrow with a game plan to run the ball over and over and over again. Use that outside running stuff that killed us that first game in Frisco back in week 2. And what does it matter who the quarterback is. We've already proven that even against a quarterback like Sam Darnold, we're still not going to stack the box. We're still not going to actually challenge him. We're not going to actually force him to make throws. No, we're going to sit back, try to protect the deep stuff, and hope things work out. Well, guess what? It's probably not going to work out because you're playing right into their hands. But let's. What do you make of these two quarterbacks in particular? I know we just said it kind of doesn't matter, but let's live in a world for a minute where it does matter. What's your evaluation of Brock Purdy as a player, as he was in college and now in the NFL?
I took a little bit of a decent look at him in college. He's an undersized guy that you spoke to the fact that he's a little bit of this new prototype of guys coming out in the draft into that fourth round range and onward, not the top end quarterbacks, but the guys at the forward. And what you find in him is they'll be 6'1" undersized. They don't have a strong arm, but if you keep them inside 15 yards, they can be highly accurate. They can throw with anticipation. They can throw on time. They can mechanically be pretty clean overall in the way that they go about what they do. So they do bring stuff to the game. Of course, there is just that overriding limitation that then exists over the top with some of these guys in the later rounds of they can't push the ball up the football field. They can't make every NFL throw that you would like a quarterback to be able to make. So you're structuring an offense around some of their limitations. But you talk about a guy like Shanahan, you're talking about a guy who is ideally suited to build around a quarterback's limitations. Maybe the best, one of the best head coaches in the league off from an offensive stylings wise of overcoming maybe a little bit lesser quarterback play and still being able to create a pretty explosive offense that can score a good amount of points. I'm not saying that he's the most brilliant offensive mind in the game, but I think he is very good in that aspect of things.
Yeah, Shanahan should have like an infomercial. Like, are you a quarterback with a weak arm? Then come on down, and I can get you a 9-figure contract.
Exactly. We'll get you 3,500 yards today and 26 touchdowns.
Yeah,
come on down.
It is crazy how he manages to pull this stuff off. I look at stuff like that, and I wonder how are 49ers fans actually really. How are 49ers fans? Some of them sick of this guy. Like, I would love to have a coach who can pull off this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's and doing the little sit down that I did with the Niner channel this week on Monday, you get a little bit of a view of that because they definitely deal with that stuff on it. And there's just some things that have obviously in his game that are holes that drive them crazy in a lot of ways. I think that we have with Carroll to drive us crazy, where it's not that they're not a great coach, but the things that drive you nuts about him really drive you nuts about him, I guess. And that seems to be the tenor that I get from their fan base on it. Though I do think he's a very good coach. Not perfect, not the greatest grace, but one of the better coaches in this league. And I think he's done a very good job there in San Francisco and how he's put that together.
Right. Real quick here, turning the page to Josh Johnson, the other quarterback we may play. Just to quickly run things down here. So far in his career, the Buccaneers, 49ers, the Sacramento Mountain Lions, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, 49ers again, Bengals again, New York Jets, Indianapolis Colts, Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, New York Giants, Houston Texans, Oakland Raiders, Washington Redskins, San Diego Fleet. I don't even know what league that is. Detroit Lions.
That was a delivery service. That's when he was delivering stuff, actually.
Yeah.
You're just
yeah. Detroit Lions again, Los Angeles Wildcats, San Francisco 49ers, New York Jets, Baltimore Ravens, Denver Broncos, San Francisco 49ers. And that's where he is now. So is this guy just using the NFL as like a scam so he can get like free frequent flyer miles or something?
I don't know. I mean, he definitely is going to be in line for a pension with that many years played at the NFL. And I can't say for sure why he's kind of been around for as long. And because he doesn't really, if you look at him, he hasn't been on the field really. He's always seemingly kind of that third quarterback or the emergency guy on these teams where he's on the roster technically, but you don't ever really see him. So I don't even have much at this point of an updated scouting report, aside from saying he probably brings a little more mobility even at his advanced age than what you get from Purdy. And they're probably going to be pretty equivalent to how they throw the football. What I think the draw of San Francisco to Josh and why they brought him in as this guy is because of the fact he has the familiarity with Kyle Shanahan's offense. And so don't need to get a guy off the street who's got to learn this offense at the 25th hour should he have to go in. He'll know the plays, he'll know the calls, he'll know what he needs to go do with the ball. Whether he can play well, if he's got to get on the field or not, we'll see. But as you just spoke about earlier in this show, Shanahan's offense doesn't always require the quarterback to have to be setting the world on fire in order to find a productive flow.
Right. Speaking of things that don't matter, by the way, we also know the Niners are going to be missing their star wide receiver in this game, Deebo Samuel. He is out for the next 3 weeks, leaving them with Brandon Ayuk, who we know about. He's a pretty good player. He was a first-round pick. He's got a lot of talent. And then you kind of get pretty thin here pretty quickly. You've got, I believe his name is Jawan Jennings.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got McLeod the third, not a junior, a third, Ray McLeod. Any opinion of those guys?
Jawan's a little bit of a bigger body guy. Ray's a little bit more like your Penny Hart kind of guy that we have with us, right? I think a little more of the undersized, jitterbug, moves quick in space kind of cats. Those guys I don't think are as worrisome to us on what they're doing. Certainly Brandon Ayuk is starting to really. He's a former first round pick that took a little bit of time to come along. He's been in the doghouse of Shanahan a couple of times. Seems like he's out of that doghouse now and he's being allowed to really roll. So he's been a very good player for them. I kind of feel like, and maybe you feel this, see if you feel the same way, that the real easy peasy run here is to just put McCaffrey into Debo's spot until Debo comes back. So he just runs the Debo roll pure until you get Samuel back in.
Who's in the backfield then?
They've got a couple of other running backs back there, from Mitchell to the
Mitchell's hurt, isn't he?
Is he hurt? There was a couple
other Mitchell went on IR.
There's a couple of other guys then that they've got going back there. There's a big back that the guy was trying to relate to, like a Marshawn Lynch type, a hammer back. I don't think it's something you'd look to do in the playoffs, Brendan, but if you're talking about getting through the end of this year and understanding the importance of that Debo Samuel role and understanding that Christian McCaffrey is almost that exact same skill set, albeit maybe a little bit lighter, maybe not as, even that, very, very close to each other. And he can do all the receiver stuff that Debo could do. If McCaffrey wanted to come in this league and be a receiver from the moment he stepped foot on the football field and not be a running back coming out of Stanford, he would have had a great career. He would have been a Cooper Kupp guy. So he can do all of that stuff. And it's such a big part of the Niner offense, Brendan, because of how they challenge you laterally, the pre-snap motion and needing the threat pre-snap motion wise to draw those linebackers in the opposite wrong direction you want them to step so you can counter back in another direction. And you lose that if it's, as we've seen, Brendan, not just any guy can run those fly sweeps. Not just any guy is built like a sub running back receiver type. They're kind of few and far between in this league.
Yeah, the thing I would say about that would be, if you're the Niners and you're going into this game thinking we're going to run the ball, wouldn't you rather have your best player in the backfield and not lining up at receiver all the time?
Well, that would be the case if I ran more of a traditional offense, but the Niners don't run a traditional offense. A lot of what they do is in the bubble screen game and in the fly sweeps. And so if it's a matter of, is Christian McCaffrey going to get his touches or not? If he gets the equivalent amount of touches running a Debo Samuel role as opposed to being a traditional running back, and the Debo Samuel role is a more important position, I would argue, in this Niner attack. The Niners didn't spend $20 million on the running back in this offense. The Niners haven't put a lot of draft capital into it since they went out and got Christian McCaffrey. They've been sticking to lower end guys. They seem to feel like they can kind of put a guy in there and be successful in running the ball. I don't know that they have the same kind of confidence in the guy that runs the fly sweep, bubble screen elements, the yak space guy that they have in this offense that's so important to what they do.
All right. That makes sense. I can definitely get behind that. It's just, it seems like teams understand that not only are you going to run the ball against the Seahawks defense, you're running it up the middle. You're just keeping it very simple, and we can't do much about it. So I wonder if maybe they abandon a little bit of that.
It's kind of, but that's, I would say at the end of the day, though, we've been attacked as much laterally as we've been attacked inside. The Cordero Patterson game against the Falcons was all about the pitch plays to the edge. The Rams a couple of weeks ago had Cam Akers come into the game and ran for 3.3 yards per carry, coming into the game, ran for 3.5 yards per carry in that game. How did the Rams attack you? With the fly sweeps. That's how they did it. That's how they got their job done on the ground. So I would push back a bit on that to say, yeah, last week there was a lot of Foreman in there, but there was a lot of attacking to the edges on top of that with Chuba Hubbard, who was their lightning to the thunder. And so I think we've been equally bad both inside and out this year in the running game, just my opinion.
That makes sense. I can definitely get behind that. So that's most of the stuff to do with this Niners offense. Let's look at this offensive line real quick. It seems like they've got some problems on the interior, and it seems like they've got a good tandem of tackles here with Trent Williams, who might be the best left tackle in football, and McGlinchey, who's been fairly good so far this year. He's been kind of inconsistent over his career, but They do have a little bit of an issue with the interior, it seems like. Do you think that might be something we could take advantage of?
It's possible. Are you speaking to Brooks, their left guard, mainly?
Banks, I
Banks,
believe.
sorry,
Yeah,
I
Banks.
think I was
And Burford has been starting for them. He's a rookie. I think it's a Spencer Burford from UTSA.
Yeah, according to the Niner channel guy I was speaking to the other night, Buford's been playing pretty good football for them as a rookie. When I was looking early on in the year at Banks, he seemed to have been doing okay, 70-ish as a PFF score. I haven't checked up on him recently though, so I'm out of school on knowing where he's at. Of course, this season they did have the retirement of Mack, their center this offseason. And then that's not easily replaceable, and losing that guy and then just bringing through. I wasn't big on Banks coming out of Notre Dame, but I was more worried about him in pass protection. And I think, Brendan, that's where, if you're talking about this line in general with the Niners, where you can get to them and where we've had even some success with our Seahawks team in recent years past at times here and there, like that Niner game a couple years ago, the famous one that was on the road there, is when you are able to generate your pressure on these guys and put them in position where they have to throw. But they so very rarely are put in the position of having to throw because they can run the ball so much and then get into third and shorts. It's hard, you don't see them put in the position where, with Banks, pass protection issues, but how often are you going to be throwing the ball in this game if you're the Niners? Maybe 20 times as an ideal. And then of those times, how much you're going to have an opportunity to get, especially with that interior we have, where there's just not a lot of pass rush coming consistently from those boys inside.
Yeah, if I'm the Niners, I don't know why I throw the ball once. Maybe I throw the ball once the whole game just to remind us that we can do it. But
Yeah.
I mean, by the end of that Panthers game, they were running the same play over and over and over again, and we couldn't stop it. So I don't know why any team would not just do exactly that until we proved we could stop it.
It's too deep in the years. You're right. It's a blueprint that's in place. And why go deviate from a blueprint that's been has been successful for every team that's committed to it? Any team that just commits to, I'm going to run the ball today, we're not going to gravitate away from it and suddenly become pass happy third quarter. We're going to stay and we're just going to keep chopping wood the whole day. And eventually that tree is going to fall. And it's worked for those teams that have done it. And you're right. You got the coach coming to this game, Brendan, that's already the coach best program to kind of overcome lack of quarterback play, and then who already wants to run the ball way more than he wants to pass. It's tough. It's tough in that respect. It's not ideal as far as the matchup goes for a team that's struggling and stopping the run.
Right. So for whatever it's worth, and you know how I feel about PFF, Burford's grade right now is 47. He's one of the worst right guards in the league, or one of the worst guards, period.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of a problem there, according to them. I don't know if, again, sometimes they miss, but not that often in my experience.
Yeah. No, it's and that definitely is at 40s. That's pretty legitimate that you are struggling a little bit to get into the 40s. At 50s, there's a little variance there. Maybe you can go, well, he's played at least league average, but that is interesting. Where's Banks at right now?
Banks is a 63.
Okay. So yeah, he slid a little bit back then as the years gone along there in that stance of things, but he can run block. He can create holes. So he's pretty good in that respect of things.
Yeah, I know a lot of Niners fans who hate Jake Brendel, their current starting center. So maybe that's another area you can attack. I don't know. I mean, there's not a lot of faith on this defensive line right now.
Yeah, and look, they were only going to be able to do as much as they could on this team with where they're at cap wise, and they were trying to get the Deebo Samuel extension done. They've got to be thinking about the Nick Bosa extension. They had guys they were trying to figure out Jimmy Garoppolo and bringing him back in and at a reduced salary. They just didn't have the cap space with some of the contracts they've signed to go out there and find another center. And we learned this back in the day. When you're in the middle of your run and you're right in the middle of the run, there's a little bit of that. Oh, we're losing a little bit here, and then we're trying to overcome there as we stay in our run. But it's a little bit of one step back, one step forward, and they just had to kind of. They're just having to kind of make do, I think, until they can get a year around it to maybe get back and address it.
Right. So you put it all together, and it doesn't look great. Now, one thing that happened after that Panthers game, I'm sure you saw it too, was Bruce Irvin, one of the guys on defense who actually seemed like he played pretty well on Sunday against the Panthers, kind of challenged the team. How should I put this? Kind of challenged their interest, challenged their buy-in, right? He had some not so nice words to say about some of the guys on this team. And going into a game like this, you do need something like that to maybe wake these guys up. That's your only chance. So I hope that what Bruce Irvin had to say resonates with some of these guys, because you're going to need something like that to turn it around against a team like this.
Bruce has come into this building halfway into this year, and every single game you can see him playing with that same kind of spirit that we saw from those defenses back in the day. He's obviously not as fast as he once was. He's probably can't be as productive a pass rusher as he once was, but he still plays with his hair on fire. He's selling out. He's throwing his body all over the field. He's playing with an edge. It's undeniable when you watch Irvin do that. And it stands out specifically because you have so many guys on the rest of this defense that does not stand out to you about them, where is the edge? Where's the guy playing with that fire and passion? I watched Cody Barton go over and miss a tackle and come up smiling and big old goofy grin on his face. And he's just, oh, I missed a tackle. And it's a wide, far breath from where we used to be as far as the defenders we used to have on that defense. And I'm not trying to talk about we got to rebuild some legendary defense, but I feel like to play defense, you got to have a lot of those guys, a lot of those dogs out there. And Irvin bringing it up, I think, is indicative of the fact that he's not seeing it. And I'm not seeing it either on the film. These guys I'm not gonna say we got like Boy Scouts on defense, but who's playing with any kind of edge right now? Who's the guy that stands out to you that's like, wow, he's really, Uchenna, I guess, would be one guy that I'd say it's like that. But I don't know. There's a lot of other guys out there that are showing that same kind of fire out there on the field. Like Al Woods is a guy that shows you that kind of play. But I think Irvin's right. There's a lot of guys in this defense that are not bringing that. And it's not just about talent. It's about the buy-in. It's about I'm selling out for my teammate. I'm giving you everything I got on this football field. I'm giving my heart, soul. Or are you just going out just to do your job and earn your paycheck? And I think that's what Irvin's probably kind of talking about, because if you're just going out to earn a paycheck, you're just going through the motions, you might be able to be functional, but you're not going to be a good defense. You're not going to be an outstanding defense, and you're not going to be probably a great team. It's a requirement to get you there.
I mean, if that's the case, though, if these guys aren't buying in, that's a pretty terrible commentary on this coaching staff not being able to reach these players, right? Because that's the kind of stuff that Carroll is supposed to be good at. That's the kind of stuff that this coaching staff in general, I think, is supposed to be good at. Getting these players, particularly on defense, to buy in, getting these guys to commit themselves, even if the results aren't great, to at least make it as good as it can be. So what does it say that we're here in week 14, week 15, and we've got the oldest guy on the team saying, I'm seeing these guys not give effort?
It's a bad indictment. Yes. It's not a death knell indictment to Carroll to say that he can't motivate a team anymore, but this is, along with him being unable to stop the run, there are things now diminishing that he always used to bring, even in the worst of times, that you could count on. Having the team motivated to play every single week and meeting that challenge, whether they won the game or not, from an energy standpoint, matching that energy standpoint across from him, that stuff has at times failed this year. And then as well, stopping the run, which used to be, even in those years where we gave up 1,000,000 yards passing, we could somewhat relatively at least lean back on stopping the run one point or another. Both of those two things have gone backwards a bit in Carroll's game a little bit. And again, because I feel like I got to parse this through, Brendan, because people hear that, then they go, okay, so you're saying Carroll's got to be fired then. That's it for Carroll. He sucks as a coach. That's what you're saying. It's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that these are ever-growing issues right now in the coaching game of Carroll. He's got a lot still he brings to the table, but if he's losing the ability to stop the run, if he's losing the ability to be a defensive maestro, if he can't motivate the players, I think that this is an issue that goes beyond just this rebuild year. And I think that there's a little bit of a pull in some fans here, Brendan, to look at this year and go, it's all bonus, or what happens on the field doesn't really matter because we're just trying to get through this season to get to the next. I would caution that that's a little bit of a maybe a foolish way to look at this, because again, you're going to maybe ignore some of the problems that are going to still be prevalent down the road because we're not dealing with them, because we're just washing it all the way to a lost season that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I would push back on that philosophy for a couple different reasons. For one, this team showed you for a solid month what they could do, and then now suddenly they can't get anywhere close to that. I think that when the team shows you for a month that they can be not only a good defense, but a great defense, and then they just can't get there, you have to reevaluate the way you're looking at it. I think that's one.
Mm-hmm.
And also, number two, let's think about why we are currently in the position that we're in, where we have a approximately mediocre football team, where I think we can say that our offense has carried us for most of the year. We have the sixth best offense in the league by points scored. Whose responsibility is that? Who is responsible for the offense being so great? I think that we all have a pretty good idea that Waldron is the one pushing the buttons there more than anything else. Now, Pete's the head coach. He ultimately takes blame and credit for everything this team does. But if you really want to parse it out here, we have one of the best offenses and one of the worst defenses. And what side of the ball is Carroll more involved in here? When we went into this season, I thought we were going to have a bad offense and a slightly above average defense. We're not getting there. So I have to evaluate that through that lens as we move towards this offseason. So I don't think the argument of, oh, we weren't expecting anything this year, so everything's okay, holds much water.
Yeah, it just doesn't for me either. I think it's a bit of an excuse as to opposed to an explanation. And when you go to explain this, I think your points on that are kind of right on the button with it, where this is, the offense has not necessarily been Carroll doing something great. I'll give Carroll credit in that he relinquished some of his old designs on offense, Brendan. Like, I need to run on first down all the time, right? We're actually passing a little more on first down than we ever have before. The up tempo nature of the offense, the willing to throw more than you passed. Carroll and this is where I'm trying to give credit, Brendan, because I feel like we're not getting sometimes through to the people that we're trying to talk about the criticisms of it, because they're just thinking, well, we're painting the Carroll broad brush of he's bad, and so I'm going to tune you out. But it's not what I'm saying. There is good things he's done from a managerial standpoint and guiding and directing this team. The development of Tariq Woolen out there as a cornerback is obviously is a big part of his game in doing that. There is stuff Carroll brings here, but I think it's important to look at this stuff on the somewhat negative side, because again, it could last into future years. And like you said, the defense is his baby. It's one thing to relinquish the offense, which he has probably a half care for. And it's another thing when it's his baby, it's his defense. This is where he's made his namesake. And it's a defense that he's carried for 3-4 decades. Hard to let that go, hard to let that go. And I understand that, but maybe my only hope right now at this point, Brendan, is just that it took 2 years to get the offense relinquished and to let Waldron take it. Maybe so too will it take the defense 2 years to take his fingers off of it and go, okay, Clint, okay, Sean Desai, I see I just got to stop. I'm inputting too much, trying to draw you guys 2 different directions here rather than letting you just fully buy into this Fangio cover 2 shell and letting you run it. So let's let you run it. Let me just let you go on. And I'm hoping maybe he gets to this offseason and can get to that same state he did with the offense. I don't know, though. I don't know. I know that he loves his defenses, and that's probably a very hard thing to ask Carroll to do.
Right. Devin Kubonder, thank you for the $9.99. Go
Woo!
Hawks. That's a sentiment
Hawks.
I can get behind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something that you can always express no matter how the team is doing. They could be undefeated. They could be winless. You can still express that.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. But one thing that came from that Carolina game is Carroll seemed a little bit distraught in that post-game conference, talking about, the fact that they couldn't stop the run. And knowing Carroll, it's definitely extra embarrassing to watch his team have the same play run against them over and over and over again, just running it up the middle, basically, and he can't do anything to stop it. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we all know that Carroll takes that personally.
Yeah.
So one thing he said was, I've got to do a better job figuring out, basically saying I need to find a way to scheme a better run defense. Is there any trick in his bag that you think he can whip out for a game like this?
I believe there is. I've been mentioning it for weeks on end here a little bit, Brendan, so it's not going to be much of a change of flavor from what I've said. And that is that you go to the 4-3 under concepts for a team like this. So let's walk this through, right, Brendan? You can still go back out to your 4-man fronts with the 2-man fronts when you're into situations with San Francisco where you've got him 3rd 9 and Uchenna comes back out there and he can rush for the edge. But when San Francisco goes to base situations, because we saw last week, we saw the Raiders game. The Raiders go to I formation looks. Carolina Panthers at times go to I formation looks. 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 fullback kind of looks. So you counter that then with a base defense of 3 linebackers, right? That is the counter usually. So going to the 4-3 under specifically to deal with base offenses that are running a high prevalence of those type of formations would be, I think, a good way to counter that, because you're getting a de facto 5-man line of scrimmage now up against those base. There's less holes in between guys up on the front, and I feel like that could do it. You could still slide back to bring Uchenna and your outside rushers in the passing situations, but that would at least then force San Francisco into place of having to lean back into a little bit more of the, I feel like, the passing attack approach of things. Not to mention the 5th defender also widens out the defensive line. So when you're talking about playing those fly sweep plays and trying to set an edge to reroute those fly sweepers back inside so they can't round the bend and then get up the sideline 50 yards, that's easier to do, I feel like, when you got a little bit of a wider defensive line to then do that in your principles and how you're going to play it defensively. So I feel like that's the way. It's not like they don't know how to run it. All the guys on this, outside of a guy like Uchenna, everybody else on this roster from the defensive line to linebackers knows how to run a 4-3 defense. It's not going to take a huge amount of adaptation to get them in. You're not already running the same coverages on the back end anyway, so it doesn't really affect the coverages on how you're running that. So it would be a pretty easy transition if they just wanted to implement that.
Right. And another one of the players who probably would be diminished by a switch to the 4-3, you're barely playing right now. Boye Mafe's barely playing.
Mhm.
So I don't think you lose a lot there at this point. So maybe that's just the way it needs to be for the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I just think like it's when it's this bad, when it's bad, Brendan. I mean, it's one thing when it's an issue or it's like, well, it's a weakness of our team that we can't stop the run. I saw today that we're on pace to give up more yards on the ground per game than any Seahawks team in our history. I mean, that's the
Right.
80s teams where everybody was wanting to run the ball, 90s where they were still running the ball at a high amount. Here in this age of pass happy attacks, our defense is on pace to give up a record amount of yards on the ground as a franchise in 50 some years or whatever we've been around. I think you've got to kind of start doing some, desperate times, desperate measures kind of stuff here. That starts to roll off my tongue a little bit when I look at the situation. It ain't a matter of it's just kind of bad. No, it's horrific. It's getting worse. So what do you want to do?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is, like I said yesterday, there have only been a couple teams in the last couple decades that have allowed 160 yards or more on the ground per game. Us this year and the Texans this year. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And the
It's
Texans make sense because they're always playing from behind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You got the sixth best offense. I mean, if anything, you should be being put in situations with how much in times and games you've been up on teams. Imagine how much it would have been worse that running game and stopping that run, Brendan, this year if the offense wasn't putting up as much as they were putting up. Even that Lions game, you had punted 3 times and found yourself down by 21 points at the end of the game where the Lions were just running it down your throat in that particular affair. So, it could even be worse than it is. It's only not been worse just simply for the fact that the offense has been productive in maintaining some time of possession and being able to put up points on the board to press those opposition to have to throw somewhat.
Right. So I think that's about it for our defense versus their offense. It looks grim, but there are some ideas that I think we threw out there that are pretty solid. I think there are some ideas we had. Will they be implemented? Who knows? But at the end of the day, we just want something that works, something that gives us a real chance to win. And hopefully they got something for it because this game, it's not the season, but it kind of feels like the season, don't it?
It does. I think this is the most important game of the year. It feels a little bit like that game a couple years ago where San Francisco came in. It was between us and them in the division, and we were kind of fighting it out in that one at the end. And it was going to come down to that. This feels very much the same way. I think that you do have a chance you could slide in the playoffs with like a 2-2 end to things. But as far as having any hope that this thing gets a little bit improved and that you might get those 2 wins to slide you in, but you're still in kind of that state that you are that most likely in the first, second round, you might barely slide to the second round, but you're probably not getting out of that first with the team set up as they're set up. Going up against a good playoff team like a Cowboys team in the playoff is just going to Ezekiel Elliott all day with their other backup. I forget his name off the top of my head, but Pollard. They'll just go Elliott Pollard, and I don't know what you're going to do to stop that at that point. But they've got the control. They've still got the chance to do it. And Brendan, I'm not saying I know these things will work, but the one thing I got to say is I don't know. Let's see if you agree with this. I don't know that I've seen a lot of big adjustments done over these last span of, let's say, these last 7-8 weeks of stopping the run going sideways. What have they done as a changed adjustment to your eyes? I don't. Maybe I'm missing it. I could be just missing it, but I don't see them doing a lot of stuff differently.
It's
They're
mostly
just
just
kind
deck
of
chairs, right? Like one game
right.
they decide we're not going to play Quentin Jefferson very much. In another game, they decide, okay, we're going to play LJ Collier in this game.
Mhm.
This game, we're going to do, little things like that we know are not really going to change anything that much.
Yeah. And that's why I point to these things being the things because I just feel like it has been a little bit of still the same old a bit in what they've done these last few weeks, thinking, okay, we just need to get cleaner in our gap integrity, or we just need to get, like you said, it's one guy here, one guy out there being flipped in and out of the lineup. When in actuality, it does seem to be a little bit of like, let's get them some schematic advantages out there. Let's put some guys in a position to succeed rather than it feeling like they're put behind the 8 ball a little bit playing and play out at times.
All right, so let's turn the page over to the side of the ball that the Niners are really proud of this year. Maybe the best defense in the NFL. At least it's got to be top 3, right?
It's absolutely top 3. And for my money right now this year, this is the best defense in the NFL.
Right. They already shut us out once this year. That was a long time ago, but that says something. So breaking down this defense, they are loaded with guys who are playing really well this year. You've got really nice edges in Bosa and Ebukam. Ebukam's actually had a really underrated season for them. He's come along nicely as a pass rusher. They've got maybe the best linebackers in the league. They've got Fred Warner, who's been fantastic throughout his whole career. Dre Greenlaw has been really nice for them so far at the will, and Al-Shaair has it been a nice piece for them as well. They've got a great cornerback in Jimmy Ward. They've got a great rookie safety in Hufanga, although he's cooled down a little bit. He's still playing really well.
Mhm.
So this is a star-studded defense. So where might be the opportunity to exploit a weakness here, you think?
It's hard, Brendan. The first matchup, the Seahawks ran very much probably as conservative as an offensive game plan as they had all season, because Carroll, as he spoke about in the press conference afterwards, was very worried about those edge rushers getting to Geno, especially with his rookie tackles in their second game. So there wasn't a lot of pushing the ball up the football field. There was a lot of trick plays in that game, a lot of trying to manufacture stuff because they didn't trust their offense to be able to get it done. I think Fred Warner is the best middle linebacker in the sport going right now. Complete middle linebacker. He can do it all. There's really no limitations to his game. I think you rightfully so mentioned the other linebackers who are also playing really good football. I think Nick Bosa is if he's not the defensive player of the year, he's probably going to come number 2 in voting on his current pace of things. So, there's not really a lot of weaknesses here. Eric Armstead's back in the lineup for them. They've not gotten much out of still Javon Kinlaw. He's been in and out of their lineup injury wise, that former top 10 pick that they had hoped would take over for DeForest Buckner.
I think he's just done. There's
it just looks like there's maybe not a lot there with it, but they've got such a strong defense that they'll be able to overcome it. I think Ofonga that you mentioned has been a bright surprise. He's kind of like a poor man's Troy Polamalu, who's worked with him. Very, very similar. He's not the speed of Polamalu. He's like a 4.65 guy coming out, right? There was a reason when we looked at him, I think you and I both looked at him coming out, that he was going to go later in that draft, but he's a gamer. He's got a good nose for the ball. And he's really good in that aspect of things. The Niners are going to take away the running game, and they're not going to trust us to try to probably throw deep in this game, Brendan, because we did in the last game, and they're going to probably trust that their pass rushers can get to Geno before those long developing routes up the football field can develop for him to throw those balls down there. But in my opinion, this game is going to have to come down to us winning. It's going to probably have to come down to us hitting some deep shots in this game, because I don't think you're going to be able to run the ball with any kind of consistency. I don't know that you're going to be able to get a lot of consistent drives on this Niner team because they are so fundamentally clean in how they play. And so that's going to come down to me, the big play in this game for our offense. And in the running game with Walker, where it's one of those days where Walker gets hemmed up maybe on 7 or 8 carries, but if he can bust the 65-yarder or get that big play here or there, that can be just enough. And if defensively you can keep them down with the backups quarterbacks in, maybe that's the road or the pathway to winning. It's why I've said, Brendan, I think this game for us to win is a 17-14 game rather than a 27-21 game, because I just don't see that much scoring coming from us in any way, shape, or form up against this defense.
Yeah, if the defense doesn't improve drastically, then you're just looking at another game where you need Geno Smith to be perfect for you to have a real chance to win. And we've had that game a few times this year, but against this defense, you're probably not going to play perfect as a quarterback. That's a lot to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've been looking at this defense all week, trying to figure out what can we do here? What can we do here? And I know their cornerback room is kind of a mess right now. They've already lost Jason Verrett, who they lose every year, but still.
They were counting on him, though. They were counting on him.
I think they played a little bit of Ambry Thomas this year, and he's out now, to my recollection. He might be questionable this week, but I don't think he's going to play. So maybe you can attack those cornerbacks a little bit with your receivers.
Deontay Johnson, too, I believe is out as well. Another cornerback for them is also out for this game, I believe.
Yeah, I think you are right. I think you are correct. And yeah, I don't see any way we're able to run the ball in this game. If you couldn't run the ball against some of these other teams that we've been playing, which really you haven't been able to, it's going to be really hard to imagine this team doing anything on the ground. So at the end of the day, it does feel like a Geno kind of game, but it's going to have to be a Geno just manage the game kind of game, not a he's going to go score 48 points like he did against the Lions type of game.
Yeah, I just felt like, to me, in watching that tape, and the Niner game I've probably watched over as much as any game this year. I mean, I probably watched the All-22 two different separate times going through the tape on that one for a couple of different reasons. And the Niners really knew what they had in the defense early on. It was a rainy day, but they were squeezing down those short intermediate routes that Geno likes to throw. And that was why there was a little bit less at times of productivity in the passing game as in other games, because they were willing to take their chances on you not being able to hit them deep. You go back and watch that play. That's the trick play, for instance, to DK Metcalf, which was called back because, on the flea flicker, which was called back because the lineman got upfield. he's in single coverage on that throw. There's not a safety up over the top helping out. So they're not as much as into we got to be careful of our cover 2 shell stuff. We've got to run double teams over the top on DK 24/7. They're willing to play it free and open and loose. And that's why I say I think that there's a little bit more of you got to go for more of the big play here. You got to go over the top, take a couple of shots to DK in this game, especially if you're going to get him in single coverage with no safety help over the top. That's the pathway, is get some quick, easy scores in this game, find some turnovers on the other side of the ball, take advantage of the fourth quarterback out there for him or the third out there, and that's your pathway to winning. But I just running the ball, I can't see it. They're so good across the board. They're so strong. They just don't give you anything in the running game at all. They just don't make mistakes. Ice cold,
Right.
like Iceman, Top Gun.
Yeah, I will say, though, if they're able to stop the run as effectively as I think they'll be able to with their front, why wouldn't you double Metcalf? Why would you not commit 2 guys to that? It seems like you could afford to, right?
I would be with you on that. I think a little bit of it, it's just playing it more balanced, to also be aware of Tyler on one other side. I think that they know that Seattle wants to run the ball, and they just didn't. I think the first matchup, this was before Geno had gone off. I think there was less of a fear in Geno's arm, less of a fear in Geno doing something to you deep down the field. Like they probably didn't think he could do it. I don't know if they would have that same feeling in this particular game, but in watching that all 22 tape, more of these teams, when I watch the all 22, that safety's always drifting right over the top to DK every time on throws, especially if DK is pressing a route up the football field. And in that game, there was a good amount of times watching DK there where they were willing to take their chances on the outside and let it fall, chips fall where they may, so to speak.
Yeah, I just don't know if we're going to see that again, especially with how things have changed since then for this offense. But I'd love it. I'd love it if they decided to single team Metcalf for most of this game. I'd be all over that.
Yeah. And if they do, wouldn't you agree? If they do go that route, you got to take some shots. And I'm talking something, we haven't done that, a lot of that this year. I mean, there's games we've gone 3-4 games in a row without throwing a deep shot to DK. And he's one of the best deep 9 route runners in this game. In my opinion, you've got to find a way to feature him once or twice on those kind of routes, just for the sake of the threat that it puts in the opposition's hearts.
Right. I completely agree. That's something that I think is a huge part of any offense, even if you don't do it that often. Yeah, I often say an offense with that, and in football without a deep threat is like an offense in the NBA with a point guard that can't shoot. It just cramps everything.
It does, and I think that's what happened in that first matchup. I think that's why they had the guts to press DK down like that, or single him up in that coverage. Is they just went, nah, we don't think it's like to use your basketball analogy, you got a guy that you don't think can shoot the rock, right? And so what do? And you do this on any court in a YMCA if you're playing 1-on-1. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to step back a couple steps and say, okay, prove to me that you can hit that shot. And I feel like San Francisco did a little bit of that, of like, show me you can hit it behind the arc consistently to DK Geno. And as Carol said in that first matchup, they just didn't dial up any calls for Geno to push the ball up the field in that particular game because they were trying to protect the tackle. So they're telling Geno, get the ball out of your hands, run a lot of short and intermediate stuff, right? That's what he's being told. But I think that's where you've got to maybe counter that a little bit different, have some faith in this game. If they go back that way again, that's a way to attack. I think you'll find some yards there. You'll find some big plays there.
Roy Froelich, thank you for the $20 super chat.
Let's go, Roy.
What options do we have for center in draft or free agency?
So first up in free agency, it's very lean. I'm not expecting Kelsey to go anywhere else if he's going to come back for another year with the Eagles. He's one of the guys that's up here. The main name that you would be aware of, Roy, or that would jump out to me that we'll be talking about, I know Brendan will be talking about, I'm sure do a video on him, would be Mitch Morse if he's not re-signed by the Buffalo Bills. He's okay. He's certainly an upgrade probably than what we have right now at the position. Is he the best option, the best plan? I don't know that I would say that. When I look at the rest of the centers that are available in free agency off Sports Track, it's pretty lean as far as the options, Roy. It's very, very, very tight. There's just not a lot of guys out there. Maybe there'll be a guy that's released. That does sometimes happen. So we want to keep an eye on those teams that might have a guy having a cap situation coming up. At my first look, I don't have a guy to give you as far as a name of a guy that would be like, oh, this guy will be released, but there usually is one guy center wise somewhere or another. I think it was last year was JC Treader or something with the Browns that got released. That was the shocker. There'll be somebody that'll probably be, released. I do think the best pathway is the draft. The 3 guys that I've scouted so far are Luke Wilper of Ohio State, Patterson with Notre Dame,
Hmm.
And Schmitz, I did take a look at him out of Minnesota. Schmitz is the
Hmm.
most impressive of the three. He's a true second round pick. The other two, I believe, are third rounders in my view of him, Brendan.
Yeah, before the season started, I had Patterson as the best center in the draft and a second rounder, but I don't think he had a dominant year the way I was expecting. So it would not surprise me if he fell a little bit. I do like Schmitz a lot. Van Pran at Georgia seems pretty good as well.
I haven't
So
looked at
there
him
are
yet.
some nice options in the draft.
Yeah, for me right now, and I got to look at Pram. There's still a couple others to look at, but I think Schmitz, if you went with him, I think that would be a pretty safe pick to go at there and say, this guy will get it done. Like every year, these guys that are these Roy, these, be it Creed Humphrey 2 years ago or Linderbaum last year, there's some safe center options always in every draft. You can tend to get them into the second round. You don't have to put a lot into it. Those would be the guys to go with on it. I do like Patterson, Brendan. I think Schmitz is just a more natural mover and fit for our scheme. Patterson's a little bit of that. He can move well a couple steps left, a couple steps right, but you're talking about second level or pulling back across the formation. It's not as good there with that. That's where it's a little bit of he's a little bit athletically, I think, limited just to a tiny degree from what you might want in the scheme.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm looking at here because I think one of the reasons why you passed up Creed Humphrey, which I was fine with at the time, was because he didn't fit what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if that justifies it now, but at the time, I actually was not a big Creed Humphrey fan for that reason. That doesn't look great in hindsight, but that's okay as long as you then say, okay, let's go get a center that does fit the way we want to do things. And Schmitz is probably that guy. So sign me up for that. I like it.
Yeah. And Luke Wilper's the Ohio State kid's a third rounder too, but he's like what Brendan likes to call him, Roy, the typical trash can center. He's
Mhm.
if he makes Patterson look like Usain Bolt out there from the center position.
Yeah, I call them they play in a phone booth.
Yeah. Big
They
time
snap the
phone.
ball and then they don't move outside of the phone booth.
And one of those British phone booths, Brendan, that's a little extra tighter because they've got smaller dimensions over there, like one of those phone booths. Not the Superman phone booths.
Right. I wonder if the kids these days don't know what a phone booth is.
They
I haven't
don't.
seen a
They're all
phone
of a
booth
sudden
in a
they're
long
like,
time.
what are they talking about? What are these old men talking about?
Yeah, watch the scene in Goodfellas when Robert De Niro finds out that Joe Pesci got killed. That's a phone booth.
Yeah, that's how far Luke Wilper can block in space, is inside that very capsule.
Right. Daniel Dunn, thank you for the $4.99. Pro Book Brooks and Barton right here. Now, this was sent in right when I was talking about Warner and Greenlaw. So is he saying Warner and Greenlaw like a better version of Brooks and Barton? Or is he saying that he likes Brooks and Barton? Or I'm not sure what is being said here exactly.
Pro Brooks and Barton right here. Usually if I say right here, like he does, he's saying like I'm a pro Jordan Brooks, pro Cody Barton fan.
Well, Barton's been playing better lately.
Yeah, I mean, he has been improving slightly throughout the course of the year. I do think that those guys, at the end of the day, the total sum of their work this year has been below average play at the middle linebacker position. I'm not going to overstate it and say that both have been putrid and bad. It's not been the case, but the both have been below average. I think that their PFF grades are pretty reflective of what their play has been on the football field in my eye test. They're both within 1 percentage point of each other this year at like 56, 57 is a grade on the year, which is below average. Certainly they're not helped, Daniel, by the fact that they aren't getting a lot of help up front and keeping double teams and keeping those guys off the second levels on getting on top of them. That's definitely not been their fault, but they don't get off blocks very well. And when you're talking about 3-4 inside linebackers, they've got to be able to get off blocks. Go back and watch that tape with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and see how their linebacker, Devin White, was just slipping our blocks at the second level, right and left. They just can't do it. And it's a part that shows up week in and week out where they just get swallowed up whole. And when you have inside linebackers in a 3-4, because there's less defensive linemen there on the defensive line, there's more likely going to be a guy getting to the second level more often than not, like in the 4-3 defenses. My bottom line opinion on Barton and Brooks is that they can be NFL players, but I think they're ideally suited to be in a 4-3 defense. And I think that they're both probably middle linebackers in this league within a 4-3 defense. So they're both misaligned, I think, a little bit, right now from where they're at.
Yeah, and when I look at Barton and I try to find his strengths, what I see is his speed, his ability in coverage. I think he's actually capable as a blitzer. Not that we ever use it, but when he does, it actually works fairly well. I think he's got 2 sacks this year,
Mm-hmm.
and he's very rarely been sent on blitzes outside of those 2 sacks. It has nothing to do with the run defense, and that's the problem that we have right now. Like, to a certain extent, you look at Barton, you kind of go, who cares if he's good in coverage? What does it matter? We're not even getting to a point where that matters because we can't stop the run. So it's hard for me to even get that excited about that. But you're right, it's not completely his fault.
Yeah, and I think you touch on something else there with this, Daniel, is that it's, again, these guys don't have some skill that they bring to the table. They do. They have some skill. It's just that the detractions within their game kind of end up offsetting that skill. Last year, Jordan Brooks almost gave up 1,000 yards receiving from the linebacker position. He gave up more yards, Daniel, last year in receiving yardage than any linebacker in the NFL. It's hard to get up to 1,000. He's having equal problems in it again this year. You look at week in and week out his coverage grades from PFF, it's in the 30s. He's not, it's just as bad. And in a day and age where you don't cover as a linebacker, that's a problem. And it's every bit the same problem of Cody Barton, who can have his struggles in the run game, which come and go a little bit. So they're tough assessments because there is some good stuff that they do. But the liability aspects that they have too with it on the other side of it can sometimes offset those goods, man, just a bit.
I agree. Delta is the fittest. Thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Have you watched film on Christian Gonzalez from Oregon?
I have. I'm still kind of getting a feel for him. He's got a pretty good nose for the ball. I like his instincts in zone coverage. I've seen him make interceptions where he can leave his primary guy and fall into the secondary guy because he's reading the quarterback's eyes, and he's got a good feel for things out there. He moves pretty fluidly out in space. I think if I was to say of all the defensive prospects on the Oregon defense that are being looked at as NFL ready prospects from, with both of the linebackers, and I think they've got a defensive lineman, he's probably the best of the bunch. But I'm still kind of I've only watched one of his games. So I always hate to just say one game I've watched, I'm making my final assessment because it could have been a bad game or a great game for him. But I do like what I see from him in the position. Moves pretty well. I think he's got pretty good size, like 6'2", I believe. So he fits a lot of the prototypes we'd look for in our corners, being that he's got the length, the size, zone background to him, and he's got ball skills to be able to jump around and route read combinations. Athleticism, speed are probably my question marks right now as I go forward on watching the film with him.
He's probably a first-round pick, right?
Hard to say because I just haven't looked through all the corners yet. My first blush of it would say no. Probably a second round pick, but okay. I don't think quite gets up to that part of it.
Yeah, ignoring whether or not we should, I just don't know if we would ever spend a pick that high on a cornerback, especially with what we got last year out of the 4th and 5th round. So while I think it's interesting to talk about whether or not we should do something like that, I just don't know if we will. Like, how do you feel about that?
I think the only way you would do it is if you thought you were getting a talent that was a guy that was going to be a top 5 corner in this league, and you're able to take Tariq Woolen and another top 5 corner on the other side of it, and then you feel like the benefit that would bring to the defense would be worth it. If you're just talking about going and getting a guy who's going to be a solid top end player in this league or being a slightly above average starter in this league, to grab that in the first round opposite, no, because you've gotten the value out of going later rounds. I mean, the Tariq Woolen thing should only reinforce all that much more that Pete Carroll can find value in cornerbacks later in the draft. He's done this before. He's done this a variety of times before. So if that's one of the great benefits your coach brings, then lean into it. Don't lean away from it. And I think the team's very well aware of this, Brendan. That's why you've never put more than a late 3rd round pick on a cornerback in Carroll's entire time here from a drafting standpoint. And that was a very late 3rd round pick that you put on Shaquille Griffin. Right. Maybe there was one other one like Walter Thurman in the 2nd round when they first came in, but they just don't put that kind of assets into the position. And knowing right now you got Tariq, you have Kobe coming back, you have Trey Brown coming back, Michael Jackson's going to come back. It really drives down, kind of the priority there from a big time aspect of things. I wouldn't be against it. I mean, that's why I say Sealy Ringo. The talk on this one to me, Brendan, is the Sealy Ringo, because he's this far and away best corner in this draft that I've seen so far. And that is a guy that maybe has that talk of being a guy that could get into that top 3, top 4, top 5 state of things.
I don't know. I might like Joey Porter Jr. a little better.
He's on my list. He's one of my next corners to go look at. So,
yeah.
And we love our track record of those former player kids out there playing, because they do tend to be pretty good pros.
Yeah. I mean, if we got somebody like that, though, wouldn't they just throw at Jordan Brooks every play?
They would maybe, but the theory there is at least maybe you've cleaned up your pass rush enough to where he doesn't have to stand back out in coverage as long. I mean, you think back to the Raiders touchdown a couple weeks ago where they're running the tight end at the goal line, right, on Brooks, and they run him right up the straight, and then they have him curl slowly over into the back of the end zone. It's a really slow, long developing route. And Brooks almost tripped over his own feet on the play for a touchdown. But that play maybe doesn't have as much an opportunity to happen if you can get some kind of pass rush from time to time in there and speed up the quarterback's clock just a little bit.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Let's see here. Garth Knight, thank you for the $4.99. Killer Bees talking some football is appointment streaming. Thanks, you two.
Hey,
Thank you,
thank you,
Garth
Garth.
Knight.
Appreciate you, Garth. Very kind of you to say, man. Thank you so much.
Yes, I appreciate that. So, I mean, we've kind of already talked about everything that needs to be talked about in this game. So, just to quickly revisit the discussion we had about the Niners defense. So, you're kind of feeling like this is definitely the kind of game where we need to lean pretty heavy on Geno, right?
I think you do got to, yeah. I think that you maintain some balance. I think you got to get away from 72% passing like you had last week. You get to 72% passing, it's too much. You're going to end up with interceptions in the game. That's just the bottom line of it. We can't be throwing 45 times a game or whatever to try to expect to win. I think you've got to try to put in some more Brendan Fly sweeps, bubble screens, some more manufactured stuff within this offense just to try to get things going. I'd also like to see a little bit more early on with Geno of those bootlegs that have been so effective with him rolling in space and finding an easy completion out in space to start getting him into a bit of a rhythm, where last week it was a little bit more of it felt like right from the jump, we're just trying to take these deep shots down the football field, which is hard to ask a quarterback coming cold in out of the game to just start throwing dimes all over the field from the jump. Get him in a little bit of a rhythm, get him going, get him warmed up, get a nice little sweat.
Yeah, I can get behind that. That sounds like a great idea to me. Do you feel like he might be playing injured, like that hand might be a little messed up? Are you getting that sense too?
I felt like on a couple of those throws, there was some pop missing. There was an out route that he threw in particular last week on a throw where I've seen him make that throw a variety of times this year and put it with it felt like 5-10 more miles an hour onto it where it was getting there. And this game, it just felt like there were some of those throws that were just taking a little bit of an extra little bit of a beat to kind of arrive. And so that would just kind of on an basic eye test, that would seem to indicate that just a little bit to me in watching him.
I mean, nobody's 100% healthy at this point in the season, but if his throwing hand is hurt right now, that's really unfortunate.
It really is. And I would hope if it's hindering him in a way that was hindered like with Russell last year, that they're not in a similar state of, well, he's been so good this year, we can't go to Drew Lock. I mean, if it's hindering him to a point where he can't make, 83% of his throws, or he can only make up to about 83 of what he can make if he's healthy. Well, then that's probably, and I'll trust in the coaching staff to make that decision if he's in that state or not. But he's still, I don't think he's where he can't play. I think he can fight through it. Like you said, everybody's a little bit beat up at this time of the year. But the problem probably most comes out of if you're just talking about having to have him pass at too high a volume, that once you get to that too high volume point, you're going to land in this place. You're going to force it. It's why Carroll goes from a philosophy standpoint of saying, I first stop the run, I take away the big play, and something eventually good happens, because he thinks I get you one dimensional, I get those pass attempts up. And if I get your pass attempts up 40, 45, the statistics say I'm likely to end up getting an interception or two out of that because of that imbalance.
Yeah. I just wish I had more faith in this run game to actually be productive right now. It's so hard to. It feels like in any given game we'll have like one good carry and then there will be like 15 runs into the line of scrimmage for nothing. And I just wish there was a little more consistency there. We have this boom or bust rushing attack right now.
Yeah, I think the boom part of it is really the fact that the Penny and Walker are the talents they are at the position. And they show you a little bit of what having a difference maker at the running back position can bring you, as opposed to, Brendan, what those analytic people tell you, which is that those guys don't make ever any difference, that it's always the line that dictates. And I would argue that, well, I've got a variety of runs this year from Penny and Walker that I could point to and say, that wasn't all blocked up perfectly, that wasn't all right, but they turned that into a huge play. So I think that they show you that just a little bit with it. But like you, I don't have a ton of faith. The grades that have come down that we see from PFF, or what we see eye test with these guys week in and week out, has remained consistent. They're not getting any ability to push guys off the line of scrimmage. And indeed, it's the opposite, where there's a lot of early penetration. There's a lot of defensive tackles walking our guys into the backfield as soon as the running back takes it. Then he's rerouted instantaneously. And then he's got another guy over here that he's got to dance around. Then he's got to try to sprint to the edge to try to grab 2 or 3 yards. And so it's not just a one problem issue or a one place issue on the line that's causing the problem. It's here, and even the guys that have done good in pass blocking with Lucas and Cross, of course, do have, it's not a horrible deficiency in their game, but their strength is in pass protection. It's not in necessarily run blocking. So when you have the weaknesses to the inside of the line, in addition to rookie tackles, who that's maybe not also their strength, it just kind of, you just don't have the dogs to get it done in total. I think Lucas and Cross would be fine if he had some other guys on that inside that could actually create some holes at times. It wouldn't be as much an issue because they do enough sporadically in the running game to get it done.
Right. Delta is the fittest. Thank you for the $4.99 again. I'm an Oregon fan, so I watched him all year. He has 4.4 speed. His biggest weakness is in man. He gets beat in quick in routes too many times.
Okay, that makes sense. And again, Delpit is that's why I kind of wanted to admit I'm only one game into his view, and on all the guys I take a look at, I go minimum usually about 3 to 4 games, full games. Every snap I've watched that on a guy, and so I don't like making too much of an early assessment because I feel like I'll speak a little bit early before I've taken that long look at it. And that does match up to what I see. He's a zone-based corner, I think, when he's at his best. I don't think you're going to want him to run a lot of man off of my first eye test of him. But that'll be interesting to see if he is at that 4.4 speed. He may be at that point. And Oregon's had some guys in the past that can fly on the outside. That's for sure. But I promise I'll be still taking a deeper look at him, Dell. I'm just getting into these guys, so I promise there'll be some more games.
Yeah, just hard for me to believe we would take a corner that high still. Like, I'll look into it. Just like I did with Sauce and Stingley last year. Hard for me to believe we would do it.
Well, the only way that they would be doing it, Brendan, is if they looked at this new model of that they really are buying into this new analytic approach, being you build back to front, right? They've invested more in the safety position than any team in the NFL. You've got Tariq rolling. You've recently put a 4th round pick on Trey Brown. You come back this draft, you go, let's go even harder, because they're believing this is the new model for building the defense. In part because this is what the new analytic model is telling you and how you build a defense. I don't think you and I agree with that approach, that's the way to go, or that if we were building a defense, that's the smart way. We're probably inside outside guys, but that would be maybe a track that they would be taking if they wanted to go that approach with it.
Right. Okay. So I think that's about it for the 49er game, but real quick, just to talk about related news, it sounds like Russell Wilson is likely to play this weekend. So my question for you is, should Nathaniel Hackett be in jail for 10 years or 20 years?
The NFL concussion protocol is a effing joke. It's a joke. And yeah, this doesn't make any sense to me running Russell out there this week. I like, and this is just a fact that goes beyond, I don't know your standpoint on it, but it goes beyond me to wins and losses and us improving draft pick. This is CTE. This is concussion. That's as bad a concussion as I've seen him take in any time. Yeah. I mean, I've seen the guy get hit across his face by Clay Matthews, and he didn't have the look on his face that he had this last Sunday getting up off that turf. And that they're going to let him go back out there and talk his way into playing. Russ will talk his way into playing. We saw this last year with the finger. He is, and this is to give him credit, he's as tough a guy as there is in the NFL, regardless of position. Quarterbacks do not come as tough as Russell Wilson is, bar none. But that can also get him into his own trouble here, because this is something where he really should be at this point shut down for the season and call it a day. You have nothing to gain at this point trotting Russell Wilson out there. Nothing. Yeah. There's nothing that they benefit from by doing this.
Yeah, it just seems very obvious to me that Hackett does not care about his health and just wants to try to save his job, which is probably, it should be a lost cause already. But if they win some of these games, maybe he talks his way into keeping his job one more year.
Is number one. Okay, so let's unpack that. Because I really wonder if there's any feasible way that Hackett could be looking at his job right now to say that he's going to get a chance at coming back next season. I mean, he's been one of the only coaches in the league that people have talked about. Is he going to get is he getting the axe now, or is it going to be that Monday? And the new ownership group that's come in there was not the ownership group that hired this guy. Mm-hmm. And new ownership groups tend to want their new coaches, especially coming on the heels of a disastrous season like this has been. I got a conspiracy theory for you on this one. Let me try out my side of it, on my angle on this, okay? Hackett comes in and quickly realizes that when he has a guy like Russell Wilson come in, that he's not going to execute your offense. He's going to want to run his offense. And you heard this in the preseason with them having their meshing of the minds of, well, it's going to be a little bit of my offense and a little bit of what Russell Wilson wants to bring. And now Hackett's had his failure as a head coach. He may not get another head coaching job in his entire life. This may be it for him. And I wonder if there's a part of him in the back of his mind saying it failed this year because I failed without being able to run it my way. I had to fail running it this quarterback's way, who after I did it the way he wanted to have it done, it still then failed and failed miserably. Well, to hell with him. He wants to go out there and play. Fine, go out there and play, Russ. I don't care. You know, like there's a little bit of maybe vindictiveness here on Hackett's part, and maybe I shouldn't apply something like that without really knowing, being knowledgeable about the situation where Hackett's at from a mindset standpoint. But it's hard to explain this as him somehow being able to save his job, even if he's to go on and win these last few games. I think people would. It's been horrible there, man. It has been.
Yeah, but I often say that most NFL owners are looking for a reason to not fire somebody. They're not looking for a reason to fire somebody.
Well, I mean, kind of. I would say, given the situation, I think it kind of changes situation by situation. It changes by owner and the pocketbook that they have, because I think a lot of times they don't want to fire coaches because it's a guaranteed contract. And I got to hand out, like if we had let go Carroll last year, it was going to be a $50 million check that Jody Allen was going to have to write. When you talk about Walton money, I don't think that they're all that worried about throwing $25 million Hackett's way to bring in a guy that's going to make it go and do it right. So I agree that it's maybe not in their inclination, but I also think that there's, as much as any time now in the NFL, we're seeing, and it's been speeding up, coaches not having as much of an opportunity, and it goes fast if you fail out. You're not going to get a period of time there to establish yourself. And hell, we had this with Mora. I mean, this has been at least the equivalent of the Mora experience here in Denver, hasn't it?
Mora actually improved the team by a win when you think about it. Right.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah. And I mean, and he still got sent out on a rail, I
always thought that was a little unfair, even though it was clearly the right decision. I always was like, what, you're going to bring in a guy in a terrible situation, give him 1 year where he moves the team forward a couple inches. Like, there must have been something going on there beyond just the wins and losses. I'm sure there was, but it always struck me as a little dirty.
Well, and I think there was. I think there's a little bit of an abrasiveness. There's a lot of, I get the impression there's a lot of Harbaugh in Mora, and when you're winning and you're doing well, you'll put up with that stuff. When stuff's not quite winning, or he's doing maybe a 1 game better than your previous year where you weren't good, it's not enough to bring people in. And he had some bad moments. We need more dirt bags and going after the kicker after missing a kick in the game, Orlando Murray for not hitting a game winner. He's got to make that. And he looked a little unhinged at times, I think, from a public perspective on that. I do agree with you. It's not a fair situation to go out there and only give a guy 1 season to implement his coaching deal. But I also think this coaching hire was made because they thought they're getting Aaron Rodgers. They brought his drinking buddy in as a head coach, essentially. Right. And once that's eliminated as a factor for a reason why you bring a guy in, then you start to look at what are the real reasons we're keeping him in here now going forward. And if it's not a fit between the quarterbacks, it's not a fit in the culture, if he's not bringing anything offensively, and he's an offensive-minded head coach, Brendan, who's got an offense that can't score 10 points a game. That's, that is, I think, does get to a kind of fireable kind of offenses at that point. It's that old, what do you do? What do you do here?
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, he's had all those duties relinquished from him. He's handed off this and he's handed off that.
Yeah, I guess he just drinks with the team. I don't know. It's weird.
He does. He puts his foot up on the desk. And
another thought I had is, why does he not want to get fired? If he gets fired, he gets all his money anyway, and he can go get another job in Green Bay or something. Like, he actually gets more money. Wouldn't he want to get fired almost?
Yeah, I think I think the getting the fired thing is that he knows he gets fired, he's not getting another coaching job. Yeah, will he be able to get a coaching job in the NFL and get a coordinator job, and he still gets through? Yeah, but you a lot of times get your 1 shot at this and then that's done. And this very well could have been his lifelong dream to be a head coach. And that's would be understandable then maybe why that causes a little bit of consternation and anger in him, that he's, especially again, if he wasn't allowed to apply his vision. And that's something we heard from Coach Carroll about his first 2 stops with the Jets and the Patriots, is that he talked about what really drove him crazy about those stops is he didn't get to implement his vision. He had ownership and other factors coming in that were hindering him in that way. And that I would drive me crazy too. That would make me mad too, because I'd be feeling like I'm failing without getting a chance to really do all that I could do to make this work.
So the real question is, if Russell Wilson plays in this game fresh off a concussion against a Vance Joseph defense, how many interceptions is he going to throw, and why is it 6?
Well, because he keeps going. He just needs to deep shot, Russ, deep shot, go deep. It's tough, right? Vance Joseph of the Cardinals, right? On this week is what he's got. And Joseph is really tough. He comes at you in a lot of different directions, and
Exactly.
he is exotic as they go, and you're going to get every kind of blitz in the game. And he tests the quarterback upstairs a lot. And last year against Russ at home, he got the better end of Russ, and he was very much happy with himself in press conferences afterwards with Vance about what he had done with Russ, and it was where that feeling you got, Brendan, of like, I had this vision for how this week was going to go, and it went exactly as I thought it was going to. You got that feeling from Vance last year in that press conference talking about their game plan. So it's gonna be tough on Russ. And 5-6 interceptions. I'll go. It'd be funny if Hack you talk about like Hackett being pissed at Russ. He throws 50 times. He just does no running game and just decides, yeah, okay, Russ, go out there and cook.
This kind of happened before. Rex Ryan, Mark Sanchez in the preseason, right before the season started. I believe he put Mark Sanchez back in a preseason game with a third string offensive line. Mark Sanchez got hurt, which is why Geno Smith started day one.
Yeah. He had done it before. So we have seen coaches go down. It was the third quarter. I think he put Sanchez back in that game, in a preseason game. It's possible here. We'll see. I just wonder it, because you watch how that hit Russell took last week. You watch him coming up off the turf like that. The long-term damage that this stuff happens with CTE. If you suffer one and then you suffer another one back to back without having some time to heal. Again, what is the gain this year? I don't think you're keeping your job if you're Hackett. I think, it's just, and again, from the Broncos angle of this and making it overriding Hackett, even from an ownership or general manager standpoint, it's coming in and going, look, we need to reclaim some value from this situation. If you tend to send him out there and he gets concussions and he's having headaches through all this offseason and he can't see straight because you've been trotting him back out there again, now we're in an even worse situation than we already are. I mean, we're even deeper in the bucket at that point. That's why I say there's nothing to be gained here. There's only something to be lost. He goes out and tears his ACL. That he's gone throughout most of next year. Then what is that? Does that help you in this trade? Does that help you with the value sunk in on Russ at that point? No.
Well, if he gets another concussion, I mean, that's 2 in 1 week. At that point, does he retire?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's and from the Broncos standpoint, here's the thing. As I understand it, if he had to retire because of concussion issues, with those injury guarantees and stuff in there, he's getting all his money.
Yeah.
Again, it's like you got a variety of. Here's what I don't get about the situation with this concussion, Brendan. You got a variety of people here, smart people in front offices and head coaches that are all overlooking this to go let him play. And I know Russ is pounding the table going, let me play. But you would do what's best for the team at this point. And you've got so few ways to getting back to being a successful team for the Broncos in the future with your salary cap and the few draft picks that you have to work with. The needle is small for you to have to get through that needle. Why would you want to make it even smaller? Almost to a point of impossibility.
Yeah, it's just so obvious to me this is going to be a complete disaster. I don't understand why somebody doesn't throw themselves in front of it and realize nothing good and only bad things can come of it.
Yeah, he needs the corner man to throw in the towel, right? Like you see in boxing, the guy's taking the beating. Somebody's got to just throw the towel in, call it a day. Don't let him get Ivan Drago to death or something here,
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of last year in the Rams game where he got hurt, his finger didn't work, and he stayed in the game for another drive, even though he literally could not throw the ball. I remember there were back-to-back plays after he got hurt where he dropped back, looked around, just stood there and took a sack 2 plays in a row. And I was like, he doesn't want to throw the ball because he can't, because his finger's messed up. Why is he putting himself back in the game if he literally cannot throw the ball? It's like that's not helping. I appreciate the fact that you want to be out there, but that is not the way to help your team right now. Like, if you want to help your team, go learn how to read a defense in the offseason. That's going to do way more than forcing yourself out there when you are recovering from a massive concussion.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better, man. The player's always going to ask, or usually is going to try to fight their way back on the football field. It's up to you as a coach to make your assessment, you've got the power and control here. And as I said with Russell last year, even after he came back from the finger surgery situation and he was back out there playing, they could see throughout the week the exact performance we were seeing on the football field at that time, which was he's coming back too early. His finger's still not right. He can't play near to what he is when he's even normally healthy. He needs to sit down. And the coaching staff needed to make that call last year, and they didn't. They said, let Russ kind of override it. Maybe he's just such a strong personality that he just pounds that table so hard that you just can't deny him, that he just convinces me so much that he's ready to go. But you've got to make the smart decision for the organization, for the player as well in this case. Doesn't sound like they're going to do it, but I don't think it helps their chances anymore winning this game, him going out there than Reppin at this point.
Have you seen Rippin's arm? It's pretty bad. In
Well,
fairness.
that is true. He's not exactly a gunslinger, I guess, on his side of it.
Micah Ganrion. Sorry about mispronouncing that, but thank you for the $1.99. It's appreciated.
Thanks, Micah.
Let's see. Garth Knight, thank you for the $4.99. Gotta ask, how would a Seahawk win on Thursday Night Football compare with the Clowney M&F game? Hard to beat that game. It is. I will say that game, the Monday night game, was to save our chance of winning the division.
Mm-hmm.
This game is kind of trying to save any postseason hopes. So it's a little more extreme, but I don't think it would compare to the Monday night game.
Yeah, I can't say it compared to the Monday night game because that was a game where you had hope coming off that game for the future of that season, of that there being a top end of that team that has maybe a Super Bowl run within it. Even coming out of a win out of this game with the Niners, I don't know that there's any kind of win we come out of this game with, Brendan, where I go, well, we've got a Super Bowl possibility here this year with this team, even on a win. And that does make that game and that Monday Night Football game that much more important for me, Garth, because of the fact we'd just gotten Quandary Diggs in, and he has an interception in that game and makes some plays. And it was really, you felt his effect, and Clowney finally came into fully bloom, and you're like, okay, I can see how this takes shape. I can see the form this could take shape to becoming good at the end of the season to make some of that noise. But this team, I think, is just missing too much to be able to believe that they could make that similar noise coming off of a win.
Yeah, I mean, it would be special, but also remember how dramatic the Clowney game was. Literally the last play of OT. Probably not going to get that this week.
Right. And two, Garth, there was the swings back and forth in that game, right? That was a game of just them swinging their best punch, and then we swinging our best punch, and then them swinging their best punch. And it was going back and forth and back and forth. And you had every player giving their most ultimate effort, like DK trying to get down to the end zone, and he's fighting through guys, and he's trying to get every last yard. And the Niners are ripping at him, and they just pulled the ball free as he's down right at the 1 yard line and get a fumble. It was one of those games where you felt everybody fighting every last tooth and inch to try to win that game on both sides. The intensity level was ratcheted up big time. And it made it a bit of I think, a special game and a unique game in Seahawks history, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Piers, thank you for the $4.99. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that Mafe is not producing enough in his first year. I know he's a project, but for an early second rounder,
I'll let you address it first, and I'll address you get that one first.
Well, I don't think he's playing that much lately. I think he's played like 30 combined snaps the last 2 games. I can't really blame that on him. And I think the fact that he's a project needs to be kept in mind here. This guy has not played a lot of football in his life. So I don't really hold it against him. There are multiple guys on the edge that are clearly in front of him in the rotation, including a guy who wasn't even on the team to start the season. I think that there is, to some extent, you have Pete Carroll kind of liking the fact that he has this veteran presence that he's coached before in Bruce Irvin, and he's kind of fallen in love with that, maybe even a little too much at the expense of playing these young guys who he just doesn't totally trust. But no, I'm not down on Mafe. Remember, we are getting a lot out of a lot of our rookies. Mafe happens to be one of the guys we're not getting a ton out of, but I don't have any real problem with what he's doing so far.
I think Brendan puts this pretty right on the button with this, Piers. Boye Mafe's been brought in as a run defender. And then you've got to keep in mind the Darrell Taylor aspect of this too, because you're not taking Geno off the field all the way around. He's basically playing a high majority of the snaps from one edge. So that only leaves one other edge that has available snaps to go and take. And through a lot of this year, you've been trying to get Darrell Taylor in there because they're looking for Taylor to take that step forward and become that player they think he could become. And that comes at the cost of Mafe for pass rushing situations. So reduced amount of pass rushing situations, reduced amount of pass rush productivity. The good news is that he's been a very good run defender for you this year. He has been right there with Uchenna as far as his run defense goes. Meanwhile, a guy like Darrell Taylor, of course, has been horrible in that respect of things. Let me give you a comparison on this, Pierre, which is if it wasn't Boye Mafe that you were selecting with that pick, their first option would have been Arnold Ebiketie, who went to the Atlanta Falcons in the second round. And he went a couple of picks ahead of Boye Mafe. Arnold Ebiketie is basically sitting right about 7 points better on a PFF score. He's got 2 less tackles and 1 more sack. And I will guarantee you that Arnold Ebiketie's probably played darn near about twice the number of snaps that you would have seen from Boye Mafe this year in total. So, the Falcons fans, I'm sure, would tell you they feel pretty good about Ebiketie and where he's going. He needs to develop. Pass rushers don't usually tend to come in and light the world on fire from the jump. They do tend to take a little bit of time to kind of develop outside those freak shows that are like your Bosa types that just come in and they're so physically gifted. They can be great from that jump point. But I think he's got a lot of very unique skill sets that he brings, Piers. As Brendan said, he's very new to football recently. He wasn't a guy that played through high school and all that. He's kind of new to this, so there's going to be some time for him to kind of develop. But the physical ability he brings is unique. He's very, very gifted. And I think long-term, he's going to be a very important part of this defense and a starter in this league.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that. I think Mafe is going to be fine. I think there are just some... I don't know why he's not playing more right now, given the fact that he's good against the run. And that's the problem you're having right now as a team. But I'm not worried about him.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think maybe they just feel like with Urban, they're getting some more pass rush from him, and they don't necessarily feel like Mafe's giving him any kind of consistent pass rush, or as Taylor. So they're going, well, we've got to get somebody opposite for something other than just Uchenna that we can lean into on this.
Mm-hmm. Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $2. Any prospect you like for second round Bronco pick? Plenty of them.
Yeah, I could give you some names on here, Daniel. I mentioned Schmitz as the center. I think he very well is going to be available there for you in that early second round point. He would be a guy that I think would make a lot of sense if you have him there. Let me give you a couple names here, Brendan, really quick, because I've been starting to scout these guys, so I got a couple of good options for him. Obviously, we could look at quarterback like Anthony Richardson. If he was to drop down into the second round, I might be willing to kind of take a jump with him and say, hey, let's go with this guy. Sorry, let me just take a quick look here, man. There's a couple guys I want. Oh yeah, here we go. So another guy I think that I would take a look at would be Mike Morris if he was to fall from Michigan into the second round. I don't know if he will, but I think he could be interesting. Tyree Wilson, a 6'6", 275 guy out of Texas Tech. If he were to drop in the second round, that would be an interesting guy to me. Nobody really from a safety standpoint, though, Brendan. But that would be probably a couple names there that I would take a look at to be right around in that area of things. Oh, you're muted, I think.
One guy who I think might be available around there is Henry To'oTo'o.
Mm-hmm.
And Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia. Those would be a couple names I would throw out there.
That sounds about right for those guys, too, in that place. And I like both those players as well. So something around that realm of things, Daniel, I'd say.
All right. So we've talked about everything that needs to be talked about with this game. So let's go ahead and just... It's not going to feel good this week, I don't think, but let's get that score prediction out there. What do you got?
Oh, Lordy. I do think that they run the ball in us pretty well. I do think that they're able to get on top of us and score a little bit more, and we can kind of pull, and that it's kind of a little bit of what we've been dealing with. The offense finds a way to keep it close. I'll go 21-17 49ers.
I'll go 27-21 Niners.
Yeah. Hard to see the win here this week.
Yeah.
It certainly is a possibility. I'm not saying I don't think there's any pathway for us to find a way to pull this one out, but it feels like a Brendan game that things have got to kind of break in our favor. We need a couple of those freakish rando turnovers that you can get on like a special teams or something. And, a big play here or there, things kind of break like that. Just play straight up.
We need a butt fumble, maybe.
Exactly.
Like
a Josh Johnson butt fumble would be great. It's like, I was on my couch last week. I had to forget how to hold the ball. Like, what am I doing? That'd be awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out to the stream tonight. We are pushing close to 300 people right now.
Woo!
Thank you for coming out. I know things are not going the best right now, but there's still football left to be played. Season's not over yet. We got to see what happens. We got to evaluate everything that happens. Brandon, thank you for coming out this week to the channel. Appreciate having you around as always to discuss Seahawks happenings.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to everybody who came out to watch the stream tonight. I may be jumping on Twitch a little later tonight. Not sure yet. We'll see if I'm feeling up for it. We will be doing this again in the near future to discuss whatever happens on Thursday night. I hope to see you guys there. And heading into what could be a difficult to overcome trial. We got to say it, right? I mean, they need it more than ever.
They desperately more than ever. It's like, man, guys, they've been on the desert without a drop of water for days. Let's give them some bottles of water here. Come on.
Yep. Got to do it.
Got to do it.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.